Sergio Brito, and I will talk today about the Angular projects organization. It's a kind of a 101. It's more like all the techniques or all the tools and all the ideas that I use in my daily basis work when I am working with this big amount of projects, you know, like 100 libraries inside of the same repository with along or more or less 17 applications. So it's something crazy handle that big amount of code, you know, so it's big and it's challenging. Yeah, so, well, first question, can you hear me well? Or I remove these things? Yeah, everything good? Perfect. Okay, so please also if you have any questions in the middle, don't hesitate, raise your hand and interrupt me, no problem. Okay, well, I will introduce myself first. Sergio Brito. I'm instructor also in LinkedIn Learning. Yeah, so, well, my courses is in Spanish so far, but, well, it's there. I'm a senior developer for Delta Airlines, and, well, I'm a full stack developer. But most important, I love the food, you know, so who else here like eat? Everyone? Right. Well, that dish in there, name it jalea, but it's it's a dish from Peru, a Peruvian dish, and it's delicious. Actually, this is why I get married with my Peruvian wife. And when she asked me, why do you marry with me? Just I ask her because with that I can guarantee that I'm gonna eat very well all my life. So it's good to there. But well, also well, I love football, play soccer, and play movies and the bike, etc. Okay, now when everyone here works with Angular, or everyone here works with other technology that is not Angular? No? Everything Angular here? Just one there? Which technology? Vue? Okay. Well, actually, all these strategies that we will see here apply perfectly for Angular, but also apply for other techs. Yeah, so it's something good. What is the thing that we do when we are working with Angular? At the beginning, just we're using the CLI, just generate a new project, and then we have this app folder. And what we do with the app folder immediately, we start to adding in there pages, components, and we put everything. But what about if I tell you that we are misusing Angular in the wrong way? Because that is only for an application. An application is only a compilation of several utilities or several other libraries or other applications even that, okay? So the good way here, or not a good way, and a better way to use Angular here is to split everything into libraries. Even when you create just a simple repository, yes, with an application, you can create your own libraries. But there is other tools that can help us to create our applications. For example, NX. Anyone here work with NX? 1, 2, and your life improved, right? Because it's something pretty awesome working with the NX tools. Yeah, and more when you are working with tons of code in there, and more when you are gonna automate the things, and when you're gonna working with cache and work with a lot of code. So after you create your code, you start asking the question, why I need to organize myself? Why I need to organize all the piece of code? Because if in that project is you against the world, well, that's good. It's just you and doesn't matter. But even with that, when you need to go back to your project several years later, then you can suffer a lot because even you will not understand your project. And this is pretty complicated. Also, when we are gonna organize our code, we try to having this solved. Yes, we need to want to improve our maintenance, we need to reuse our components, we need to having less defects, we need to having a faster fixes, faster improves, and easy to understand and use. And having that, it's complicated, right? Having that is crazy, and more when you are working with a lot of other developers, yes? Because one thing that all the developers need to have at the first moment is follow the best practices. And to be honest, not all of us follow the best practices all the time. So for example, how many of you use any in your code? 1, 2, 3, 4. Everyone use any. It's like our It's the sin that everyone committing here, but it's hard to accept. But well, we do that, but use any is something that we are not to use. It's complicated, yeah? But time to time, is we establish these rules, and we are working with the code properly, and we are setting the code in the right way, will be better. For example, one thing that happened to me early morning when I was doing a code review from one of my merge requests was something simple. Wasn't a variable that indicate wasn't a variable named label, the type string, and then that variable was initialized in the constructor as an empty string. It's something pretty simple, right? But you say, really you need to initialize that variable in the constructor because it's only an empty string. And also, what happens if you initialize that variable directly when you are creating the variable? Remember, TypeScript use the, what is the name of this concept? But it's recognize the data type that you're assigning. So if we create the variable and just we're assigning an empty string, automatically TypeScript will recognize that is a string. So just we can remove the constructor and we can use that because that's only an UI component. So there is no reason to make any other kind of data assignations. But if you're gonna make the assignation within a big object, well, it makes sense to having just a method just to reset or initialize that variable. Okay, so it's important, and also that is good because with that you are setting the initial steps for the other developers who gonna go inside of your code, and they will see how your code is working on. So if other code get inside into your project and see everything is in order, then he will try to follow the same. It's like you know, my mom used to tell me when I was a child, wherever you go, do what they go, something like that. Yeah, and what does it mean? For example, if you go to a new country and you see that everyone in that country eat stand-up, well, you don't gonna eat sit, right? You try to go and eat stand-up because everyone is doing there. So it's the same happening to us here in the code. If you are defining the right naming variables, the right data assignations, the right data types, avoiding any's and many other stuff, well, that will be really helpful for the other developers. So what do you want? Do you want a code properly organized or not? It's painful, yes. And it's more painfully if you are in charge of all the project. And it's more painful if you are the one who needs to approve the code and you are the one to need to teach everyone. But if you define a proper strategy to work on, that will be really easy on the time to work on. But here, just we have something that is very important when we are working with our code. We need to have a good requirements. But at the beginning, when the business people came to us, most of the business people came to us with just a very generic concept of what they need. And sometimes they ask us for many impossible things. And that's crazy at certain moments. So just we need to do, previously to go and start coding, that is one of the biggest mistakes of many of developers. We receive the requirement and we start just grabbing the computer and start coding. And no, come on, calm down. Yes, you can just please understand better the requirement, even define it in paper, even define a diagram. It's easy. But sometimes we as developers, we want just to put the solution in there. Yeah, one thing that worked for me is I am using a certain technique named second brain. And in that second brain, just have a certain notes next to me all the time. And yes, all the time when I am reading requirements and an idea came to my mind, I write down then in that note. So at the end, when I was working, when I'm gonna start working in the architecture of the project, I am reading all that notes and I am applying that note. For example, I'm gonna need a library or a utility libraries who do this thing. So yes, I am defining that and I am avoiding missing any of the content. So first, when you receive all the requirements, be sure to have good requirements. Even if your source, your client, your business people is not providing to you that, you need to go and rephrase again and make questions and even make proposals. This is very important. And now, after you have your requirements, something important comes here, and is identify domains, yes? And the domains in here is pretty important. Why? Because as I mentioned at the beginning, we try all the time to generate an Angular application, And when we generate this Angular application, we start put everything in the same app folder. But what happens if you identify the domain and you see, oh, you know, I'm gonna have 3 different projects, and these 3 different projects will have 3 sub-projects inside of there. Maybe you can create a folder, and inside of that folder, you can have other folder to cover each one. What happened here? You can start sharing that content across the other applications, yes? And this is something pretty easy to use. It's only just create a folder and put your code in that folder. It's not complex, yeah? And with the ability to create libraries, you can create libraries in your local repository, and when you create a library, does not mean that you need to publish to NPM or Nexus or any other way. Just you need to create your library and you can have it in there. And then when you are compiling your application, the same compiler will grab all the code from each library from they needed. So there is no problem for that, yes? So just identify the domain properly, create the folders, split the code as you need it. This is why it's so important to identify all the domains. When you identify the domains, then you can create all the folders. But if you don't have a right requirement, it's hard to configure all these things. This is why it's so important to identify first your requirement, and after you have your requirement, then identify the domain. Actually, I will share a link with you later with certain techniques of that. Then, here, the most fun thing is the smart and the dump, yeah? So everyone see this cartoon ever? Yes, everyone? So for me, it was pretty funny. But well, just we have the smart components and the dumb components, right? So in the smart and the dumb components, it's hard to understand. For example, in the way that we used to work in certain projects, just we have split everything in 3 or in 4 different entities. We have the API or BFF section. We have the AEM static labels, yes. Then we have the smart components and the dumb components, okay? So there is 4 different areas in our code, okay? So how this works? Supposedly, we need to grab the code from the API, and we need to grab the code from the static labels, yes? A simple JSON file with all the static labels. We receive that in the smart component. The smart component will be in charge to transform that data, yes? Will transform the data and will generate objects that fit the blueprint or the signature of the DOM component. For example, you have a simple button. The button is a DOM component because that will receive all the time a label, okay? But how do you generate the label? Who knows? It's like, for example, the Angular material. You can use Angular material, but you will not ask to the Angular material team to recompile the application for your needs, right? So they put and they say, hey, this is the signature. I need a certain object with certain properties. Then you need to generate an object that fits that properties. And then you will pass the data ready to be used in the DOM component, yes? If you don't pass the data to be used in the DOM component, well, the component maybe will not work properly. And there is where one of the biggest challenges start. Because many of the developers try to pass the data directly as they receive, for example, a simple static JSON label, yes? They grab the data and try to grab all the reference until the DOM component. So what happens when you need to move the DOM component to other area? The component will break because that doesn't have the full reference of the objects, yeah? So this is something that happens, so you need to take care and use here a design pattern named adapters, yeah? So everyone here hear about the adapters pattern? No? No one? Design patterns? Any design patterns? No design patterns? Nobody use design patterns here? Wow, well, you need to use it. It's pretty useful. But well, the adapters is just like a simple class from where you receive the data, and then you can start just assigning the data into the objects, and that's all. It's a simple class, and then you have the goal object, and you have the init parameters, right? So it's like a sum method. The sum method will receive the value A and the value B. At the end, will return the value C. It's the same here. So you will receive the data from the BFF or the API, the data from the JSON file, and then will return the data ready to be used for the DOM component, right? So this is something that we need to have here in this idea. And also, when you are working with these smart and DOM components, allows to you to share and reuse the components. For example, if you're working in a big organization and you are generating your own buttons, your own drop-downs, your own UI components that follows the styles of your company, then just you can simply share that library with other entities inside of your organization, and they can use the same components. So that is a very good concept, and you feel really good when someone else starts using your library without need of you, right? So using this technique of the smart and the DOM component is a pretty good way to work on, and it's a pretty good way to separate all the entities of your code. And actually, for example, when you work with NX and when you create your project with NX in the libraries, they mention to you that they have, I think it's four different sections of your library: the data access, the data models, the UI, and the smart components. So it's like kind of four main libraries that you can use just to share the content in your application. Okay, and from here, just we land into the sustainable architectures, okay? The sustainable architectures is just a simple technique that, that you can use to code, yeah? And these sustainable architectures, it's something that you can use, name it domain-driven design, yeah? So anyone else hear about this methodology sometime? No? Well, this is a pretty good way to organize, and actually, they split the code in these two main parameters, the strategic design and the tactical design. Yeah, that remember me one lecture, so strategy and tactical and strategy, and it's pretty good because you need to identify your domains of your code. Yeah, you need to split everything in right folders, and from there you need to reuse your code. There is a link that you can use and you can go deep in this concept, yeah, because it's pretty simple, really. It's just split your code, identify the domains, split the folders, and put the code in the folder that is needed. If it's a very small project, maybe doing all this can be overwhelming, but try to do it. At the end, you can gain some confidence by applying this technique. Yeah, actually, let me share with you the, oops. This is the URL. This is for this site, the angulararchitects.io. Yes, and here is the full blog with all this content about the strategy design methodology, the implementation, the tactical design. And it's more or less the things that we are mentioning here is identify your requirements, then you need to split it into the domains, and from there just you can map that into your code, okay? So, for example, here in this case, they have this catalog, they have an approval, they have ordering, they have specifications, yes, and from there just they start mapping the code. So, also, one thing that is very important is, this is not a rule that you need to follow as a rule. It's something that can help you, and you can adapt all that strategies and methodologies to your own work. For example, from this methodology, I did not use all the full part of the methodology. I'll use most of them, and then I just adapt many of that pieces for my, that is specific to my needs. And now, pick the right tools, okay? So just, it's like at the same when you try to coding in the simple notepad or in Neo or BI is kind of complex, right? So the same here, you can just create a simple repository and that's all, but these guys did a very awesome job creating all that tool set from NX, yes? And actually right now, as I mentioned before, just we have a lot of libraries and we have a lot of applications, and we have like more than 100 coders pushing code daily to this repository. So at the beginning was a very mess because we started with the version 6 of this workspace, and then in the version 6 was pretty slow, and even takes in the machines around 2 to 3 hours to execute the lint and the test, because there at that moment wasn't a good cache technology for handle all the code. And now with these new versions, just we are taking around 1 to 2 minutes, and it's pretty awesome. And even with that, something cool is because we can split properly the concepts in domains, As soon as we split everything, just we can have a Jenkins file or maybe a GitHub Actions or any of your preference CI. Yes, you can have each one per folder. So if you have one application, you can execute that application only. But at the end, you have everything inside of the same repository. But now you will start asking, hey, why do you need or why we need to having everything inside of the same repository? Because of this, the quality rules. This is part of you or having a good organizing code, you know? Because when you are taking care of the quality of your code, you can guarantee that you can have less defects, less errors, and the compiling times will go to speed up. Yeah. The first thing, it's complex testing. Yeah, when you are doing unit testing, end-to-end testing, I like to use or go between 80% and 90%. But many of you maybe said, hey, but that's no guarantee that your project will be good. Yes, maybe it will not be guaranteed at 100%, but that is my safety net. And many times, when certain projects are failing, yes, they came to me and say, hey, Sergio, the project is failing because of your piece of code. And just with my hand in my head, just I said, nope, that's not my fault. I have tests. So, and at the end, works. And at the end, I did not touch any part of my code because my code was working good. What is the main reason that everyone complains against the 80 to 90% testing? The false positives tests. For example, when you are doing a test, we can put the sample for a sum again. You are passing parameter A, parameter B, and you are expecting a variable C, right? So this is the result. But the problem comes when a developer is lazy and the developer just execute the method has been called. You are covered the percent, you are covered the call of the testing, but you are not validating the result. And this is the important thing, validating the result. But they are just doing this, has to be called, and then they are covering. That's a false positive. So if you want to do a slightly review in your base code right now, try to do a simple find and search had to be called in all your tests, and you can see how many code that you have right now is a false positive. And it's scary because it's code that maybe is living right now in your production environments. And this is scary to having just like that, yeah? But well, at the end, it's good that it's not failing, right? The other rule is the cyclomatic complexity. We try to set that as a tree. So, but here, everyone's, or who don't know what a cyclomatic complexity is? Can you raise your hand? Who don't know? Okay, so what is this? Yes, well, in simple terms, very simple terms, is don't have too much if-else structure nested, more than 2 levels, yeah, in simple words. Why? Because if you have that, if you have more than this structure, a lot of nesting in there, maybe the code work good, yes, but the maintainability, the readability of the code, it's a pain, believe me. So at the moment that you are start receiving this, just try to extract the code. One technique that you can use to avoid this is as moment as you are writing the code, then in that moment just you can, for example, I have enabled the lint in my Visual Studio Code environment, and at the moment this is indicating me the sign. But the sign is pretty annoying to my eyes, so I disable the rule just only for my moment when I am coding. I disable the rule. Then I finish my code. As soon as I finish my code and my test is working good and I validate and working good, then I do a refactor. Then I'm extracting just pieces. So for example, each nested if is a new method. So you can use that as a new method and you can extract. Don't be afraid to create or to add as many methods as you need. In the same way as many files as you need. There is no problem. At the end, everything will be merged in just one simple big line without formatting JavaScript. So this is for us, yeah, for us as a developer. So at the end, it doesn't matter if you have 1 method, 2 methods, or 3 methods, okay? Then the next one, max lines, 150 considering comments and considering imports. And this is completely how can I say that? But everyone who works with me all the time is complaining with me about this and tell me, well, 150, we can just ignore the comments and we can just ignore the imports and then we can just have only methods. Yes, it's pretty good. But here there is another concept that comes to the table and is, if you are not planning properly your code, what is the reason to have a lot of imports and have a lot of methods? When you are planning properly your code, separating your code, identifying your domains, creating the right methods, creating the right utility services, and creating the right structure of your project, easily you can avoid reaching the 150. Most of my code reach 100 lines, 120 lines, and just maybe one or two reach the 150 with comments and also with the imports. And even there is certain methods from where I don't need use comments. Why? Because the method, the name method, speaks from the self. Yeah, so as soon as you write the method, anyone reaches assign name and the parameter is name, then you understand that. It's easily to understand. You don't need a big string to explain that, right? So this is why for us it's really very important to using this max line, and it's something that I recommend to you. And the last one is no any. Never use any, please. Unfortunately, there is certain cases in the newest versions of Angular, because for example, I think so it's starting from Angular 10, the strict compilation way is applied automatically to the Angular configuration. So when you are executing your code there is certain parts of from where maybe you're migrating certain code from an old code base into the new one, and then there is certain any's that you are using in there. Yes, for example, how can I say it? With trackages. Yes, if you want to use trackages has a very confusing implementation. But at a certain moment, you need to use a kind of an any value there just to have implemented trackages. That does not belong to your base code, but well, it's kind of allowed. You know, you can have it because it's kind of complex to have that implemented. So in that very pretty cases, maybe will be allowed. And also you need to consider solving that. It's part of your base code or not. If it's part of your base code, please try to solve it. But if not part of your base code, I mean it depends on a third party like the trackages thing, then just you consider really worth the time to work in an implementation without the any or not. And then, well, it's up to you to work or not with that anything. Then, and one part of the last one is automate. Yes, as I mentioned before, try to automate everything. Doesn't matter if you are working in your own project or in your local machine, you can have Jenkins, GitHub Actions, or any other of the CI tools available in the internet. Actually, I think so GitHub offers several free minutes per month to do a compilation and processing. Also, DigitalOcean have an available option from where you have several minutes for free just to compile your applications and so on. So just try to automate. Don't waste time doing this compilation task or validation task when you can let the computers do that for you. So, and for here, for example, when you're working with this project properly organized, remember to create maybe just a configure file per domain that you have. So for example, if you have application A, library A, library B, library C, and application A and B, you can have Jenkins files or a GitHub configuration per folder. And as soon as you have that per folder, then you can just deploy in that piece of code because you're not touching the other part of the code. Yeah. Maybe other technique that you can use is maybe by the end of the day, you can execute a general command that go and review all your code, but that will not stop to the coders to continue working in their own projects. And well, the other one that is very important here, I forget to add the adapters pattern in here, but here's couple of the design patterns. There is many other patterns out there. One is the Facade, other one is the Mediator. So everyone here is familiar with these two patterns? Yes? No? Well, the Facade, well, it's just simple. Just is abstract all the rules and just we can have it. But the other one is the Mediator. So the Mediator is something good because there is certain moments when you have a service and that service is overloaded. Yeah, so when you are overloaded, you need to generate a new service to handle all the service. And this service will be giving to you the right moment from where just you can let one code take action and when other code need to take action. Yeah, so it's in a kind of way to control the code. And the facade code is just simple like an a wall from where it's like like a this, right? So you are asking into Amazon. So then you buy something in Amazon, but you don't care about how they gonna deliver that to you, how they process that, from where that comes, nothing. So for example, just a couple of weeks ago, I bought this structure for my desk to turn my desk into a stand-up desk. And then just I see that desktop came from the other side of the world, but I don't care for me, just I go enter to Amazon and pay that. That's my facade. The same in our code. Just if then you start seeing that you start offering a lot of options and a lot of files in your code, try to abstract everything in a facade. That will be your kind of an API of your project. This is a good URL that you can go and reach there is Refactor Guru. These guys create that website, and guys is awesome because in that website they split properly how all the design patterns work, and also at the end of each pattern they offer to you different ways to implement the code in TypeScript, in Java, in C#, in any other languages. So it's pretty good. And well, that's all. Questions? Yes, sir. Oh, it's just the NX toolkit, and the other one is some manual work that I do. For example, as soon as I receive my requirements, I like to generate a diagram. And in this diagram, I express all the domains and all the areas that my application will have. Then I just go and create my repository, and then in my repository, I create a structure. That was from the beginning. But right now, for example, our big project, if you have right now one project and then you need to attach a new project into the same structure, then you already have the structure. Just you need to identify to which domain that belongs, or you need to say, okay, this code will go to this domain. So that's up to you. But it's two different. Yes, one is automated with NX, and the other one is manual because needs your consideration when you are coding. Okay. Yes, sir. Uh-huh. Yes, exactly. It's kind of the same. It's kind of the same because sometimes, well, can be escalated to the big one, but here in this case, it's escalated here. Actually, just have in mind that all the design patterns is not a concept that came directly from the code. It's a concept that came from the building system. I mean, for the building is for the construction. So that was creating the construction. Then in the 80s, a couple of guys say, hey, this is so similar to code. Why we are not migrate and create our own pattern? So it's mostly the same in the code. No, actually, other thing here is that is important to identify is the design patterns are not on a library, are not on something that you can just install and start using it. It's something that you need to implement in the way that you need it. Yeah, so maybe there is certain libraries that can cover several cases. Yes, maybe it's that. But in the cases that I am running, it's not something that we are using. Just we create our own services and we adapt that services as we need it. Okay, guys, more questions? No? You sure? Okay, well, I hope that you enjoy this one. So this is part of my experience work on my daily basis. And there is more, obviously. So, well, but please feel free to contact me if you need it. Here at the bottom, here is my email, here is my Twitter handle. So I will try to answer as possible in there. And thank you so much for coming, and please be safe, guys. And well, thank you.